Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Herbal Knowledge Keepers with Dakota Granny Woman and myself, Blue Star Dear Woman. And we're happy to present episode 15, and this is the uncommon uses of milk thistle. And a reminder, especially to our new viewers, that this show is based upon the demonstration and the use of the herbal database. And that's what you'll be seeing throughout this session. As Dakota and I discuss the uncommon uses of milk thistle, you'll see how the database works. So this is really for your information, and you can always go to the archives, especially our first episode, and it's a complete demonstration. So please join us for any further questions on our Facebook group page, Herbal Knowledge Keepers. So, with no further ado, Dakota, share your love and wisdom with us.
Okay, well, I'm going to open up my computer screen here and show you the database. As usual, this is the opening page. All right, so milk thistle. I think a lot of herbalists are very familiar with milk thistle. We consider it to be really one of the go-to herbs for protecting and healing the liver. And so let's just go down here to the search box and type in milk thistle to pull this up. I'm just putting in milk, and you see it gives us a lot of choices. Let's just go to milk thistle. In the center of the screen, you see the title milk thistle. And surrounding it are all kinds of associations to it. The purple color represents different what are called phytochemicals or plant chemicals. They tend to be over on the left-hand side of the screen. You see the 65 to 75% alcohol to water. What that means is if you're making a tincture with milk thistle, by the way, we're talking about the seed. Tincture it or eat it as a food. We'll get into that later. But this just represents the ratio of alcohol to water that you would use to tincture and get the greatest value out of your milk thistle. And then above, we're going to scroll through this and see a number of properties and therapeutic actions that milk thistle has. Down below, you see here are studies on milk thistle. There are cautions, and then for the preparation and dose, you can click on this one. So I'm just going to open the information panel. I'm pointing to these two triangles. The upward opens the panel, and you see here all kinds of information about it. Some of this will be familiar to our viewers, and some of it is likely to be rather new. For example, what do you see there, dear woman, that is unfamiliar to you?
I think I went right to that, the liver congestion and hepatitis.
Yeah.
That is new to me. I was aware of, I think, the lung phlegm and for colds.
Okay. Liver congestion, there you see a lot about the liver in relation to milk thistle. It really is one of the strongest hepatoprotective herbs that we have. Liver toxicosis, basically what that means is there's a damaging effect from the various toxins that the liver is working with on the tissue itself. And degeneration of the liver cells. Even liver cirrhosis, fatty liver infiltration, what that means is there's a tendency for the liver to build up fat. We're familiar with that in what's called alcoholic fatty liver disease, when folks drink too much.
Right.
Then one of the things that happens is fat accumulates in the liver, slows it down, and eventually causes a lot of damage and what's called fibrosis that leads to this condition, liver cirrhosis, and that's often what alcoholics die from. But
I
that can
have a
be,
I have a question about that, Dakota.
yeah,
Is that when an alcoholic has the symptoms of they seem to get like a double chin, they get kind of bloated looking?
that's part of it, yes. The liver is not able to detoxify properly. It's not able to do its job. And there are something like 500 different functions that the liver performs in the body. So all
Mm-hmm.
of those are compromised, and you can get, as a result, just a plethora of different symptoms. The bloating, though, is part of it, and of course that would also be due to kidney damage. You see here, even I'm looking at urinary stones, gallstones, cardiac edema. The blood, it affects the blood. Now, some of that's indirect because of the support that it's giving to the liver. And like I said, the liver has about 500 different functions. So any time that it helps the liver, there can be assistance in these other areas. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit more.
While you're scrolling, I have another question that I think is probably a popular question. When we're looking into herbal remedies and we begin to cross-reference, and then there's an entire list of all the things that it can treat. The question I have is, how do we determine what the most potent treatment is? Like, for instance, we might look up milk thistle and we might look up another herb, and they both treat toxic liver.
Mm-hmm.
But you know how, you get a multitude of things. So it's like, how do you know which one's the most potent herb?
You see a professional is one answer.
Good answer.
A clinical herbalist who's had a lot of experience with these herbs. That's probably your shortcut.
Okay.
The other approach is study, education, taking time to learn about, let's say you've got two different herbs you're considering, and of course, as you say, there could be many, many that help. For example, let's just go to alcohol damaged liver. I'm going to click on this. By the way, green means that it's related to some type of therapy or condition. And so I'm going to click on that and look at all the things that help. So you could go, gee, where do I start? And my recommendation to people is, well, you know me, my recommendation is you learn. So the purple are all phytochemicals. The green relate to therapeutics, and blue relates to an herb that is also a food. So let's go back to milk thistle.
So I guess once you start to do the research, like you may have a particular aspect to your condition, and like, something says melatonin is specifically treats that. So it's like you're saying, once you go do the further research, you can start to identify more detail.
Yes, because also as you go through this, you see that there are many things that milk thistle can do. How many of those affect you? For example, let's say it treats, you discover, well, there are 5 different therapeutic functions that milk thistle treats that I have going on. Whereas this other herb seems to be relating to a different sphere of symptoms more. It might treat alcohol damaged liver, but it seems to do a lot of work in other areas that aren't really a concern to me.
Mm-hmm.
Another way that you can choose is availability. So you may, and that's one reason why I make an effort to include a lot of choices, because you may not have, for whatever reason, access to milk thistle. Mm-hmm. And so what else can you use if you don't have it? Now, in the case of mushroom poisoning, you definitely need milk thistle. It is the #1 medicinal herb to treat, for example, poisoning by the death cap mushroom, which liquefies the liver. So in Europe, for that reason, they keep milk thistle extract in the hospitals so that if anyone comes in, the milk thistle is injected into the patient and saves their lives.
So a question, what does Western medicine use if you've been poisoned by a mushroom cap?
Not much. They really don't have a good therapy for it, a good medicine for it. In fact, I know of one instance where someone was rushed to the hospital in the U.S. with, I forget which mushroom they ate, but it was destroying the liver. I may not have been death cap because the doctor thought there was time enough to contact a hospital in Europe and ask them to rush the milk thistle to the hospital to get it into the patient, which happened. They managed to get it here fast enough, and the doctor was able to give the milk thistle to the patient who survived. So now this is as of a few years ago now that the hospitals and doctors in general are starting to learn how important herbal therapies are. They are starting to embrace some of this in standard care. So let's talk about some of the things that it does. Oh, one thing I want to just mention, I don't usually mention the items you'll see on the right side of the screen, and the reason is they always relate to something up above here. And so we can ignore those for the most part. Once you become fluent in the database, you'll understand those more and make use of them. Now you see a scroll bar up here. When I drag this, I'm able to see more listings appear on the screen. There are too many for us to see, so we'll just drag the scroll bar. I'm just going to mention a few of these, and then I'm going to zero in on one of the uncommon uses that I think is super important. You see cisplatin here. That is a chemotherapy drug that's used fairly commonly. It has a lot of very negative side effects. Milk thistle is one of the herbs that can offset some of that damage. We see that it's an anabolic cooling liver herb. Now that's a term used in herbal energetic. Anabolic meaning that it's building up. It actually regenerates new liver cells. So it's not just protecting the liver from damage. It's helping the liver to produce new liver cells.
Can you take the milk thistle during chemo, or do you have to do it afterwards, after the damage is done?
I would take it during.
Okay.
And after. And before. In fact, if you'd taken it before, you might not even have the problem. But that's a whole other show, or several shows. Let's scroll through here. We see vermifuge anthelminix. Do you know what that means?
A vermifuge?
Mm-hmm.
No, I do not.
This is one of the properties or actions. It means that it helps to get rid of worms in a nutshell.
Huh.
It's an antidepressant herb. That you can understand that it would work indirectly because depression often has a chemical basis, and that chemical basis can sometimes be traced back to a dysfunctional liver. It has an antihistamine action. It's not one of the major herbs for that, but again, some of this is through these many functions that the liver plays a role in. And I would, by helping the liver out, then this whole chemical cascade of histamine overproduction can be better managed. It's a strong antioxidant, especially in the liver, and it has an astringent action on venous and uterine blood congestion. It's a bitter herb, helps with bladder stones, blood in the urine. If you have low blood pressure, it can help. And here we go, cancer prevention. I'm not going to click on that or we're off and running. We've got so many things that help with that. chronic bronchitis, gallstones, cleansing smoker's lungs, the common cold, and diabetes is where I wanted to stop because this is one of the more interesting aspects, uncommonly known, about milk thistle. Milk thistle contains a flavonolignin called silymarin. And silymarin has a lot of information. And this is something that can actually prevent a buildup of a type of an amyloid. You might recall that from our session on Alzheimer's. Amyloid is this kind of a gluey polypeptide, and it can build up in the pancreatic islets that produce insulin. Mm-hmm. That buildup is one of the routes towards diabetes. This silymarin prevents buildup of amyloid in the pancreas. And that's one of the ways that it can protect you from developing this diabetic tendency. That's how it protects us from diabetes, but it can also stimulate the beta cells of the pancreas to start producing more insulin. So even if you already have diabetes, this could be used. It's also very good for preventing some of the complications. One of them, for example, is called diabetic retinopathy. What happens is when glucose builds up in the body, there are some areas of the body that have a different way of handling glucose. For example, the eye. And the eye, when there's a glucose complication, the eye starts to accumulate a type of sugar called sorbitol. And the sorbitol is what buildup is what eventually causes blindness. So the milk thistle acts to prevent that sorbitol buildup.
And what might be the entry point for beginning? Do you need to first be diagnosed with diabetes? Or is there any kind of signals? When would be a good time to start doing milk thistle?
I think of milk thistle as one of the herbs that you want to regularly use, everybody, especially as we get older, and there's likely to be some damage that's been caused to the liver because let's face it, the liver has been overworked with all of the toxins in our environment, clearing out the medicines that people are taking, especially older generations. They are taking an average of 5 different pharmaceutical medicines every day. Those are a real strain on the liver. A lot of our food, the glyphosate, the list of toxins that the liver has to deal with is outrageous. So giving the liver some support on a regular basis is a really, really good idea. There are a couple of ways you can do that. One of them is to take it as a food. You can get the milk thistle seed and grind up a little bit of it, let's say a tablespoon or 2 every day, and just throw it into whatever you're eating. That's going to be a real helpful ongoing preventative. The downside of that is that the seed is not inexpensive. So for folks on a budget, that's going to be tough to do. Do it whenever you can. Grow. If you have a lot of gardening space, grow it. It's a beautiful plant. Right. Let me see if I have a picture of it here.
Yeah, I always like seeing the pictures. So when it goes to seed, that would be the time to harvest.
Yeah, save those seeds. Mm-hmm. And when you are grinding it for food, only do a little bit at a time because it can oxidize rather quickly. Most seeds contain oils that oxidize, so you want to. I keep my seeds in the freezer, even if I'm lucky enough to have a freezer, and just grind a little bit as you go. Now, if you think you have reason to be concerned about your liver, another way you can do it is to take a standardized milk thistle extract. And the reason a standardized extract, I think, is a good idea in this case is that they're standardized to the silymarin at about 70 to 80%. And that seems to be one of the real power players with milk thistle that's doing all of this work in the liver and keeping the sorbitol from building up in the eye and other areas.
So it would seem that some of the research that would serve us as the extent that a human is upon the earth is the point at which deterioration begins, when the aging process starts to challenge, say, the liver.
right.
It almost seems like we could have a prescribed preventative time to begin to initiate these kind of support herbs.
Yes, and I think that it's a good idea to once a year get yourself a good standardized milk thistle extract. Invest in it. It's not that expensive. And take it for about 3 months.
Would you recommend a particular season of the year to do that?
The spring.
Mm-hmm. For spring detox?
Yes, although let's be careful about the term detox. There's a lot of misinformation about that. I think it's a future show, one of many shows on detox. Think of it more as liver support. The liver is a great detoxer. It's the central detoxer of our body, one of them. And if all we need to do is support it, and it can do the job. So let's focus on supporting the liver. There are a lot of ways to do that. Milk thistle once a year will give it an edge. It'll help to bring it back to life and give it a chance to do its job the rest of the year. So that's my recommendation. So again, this is especially important for diabetes because especially diabetes type 2 is considered an epidemic in this country and increasingly around the world. One of the sad things about diabetes type 2 is that it doesn't have any symptoms until it's fairly far along. So you won't even know you have it. I would say that there are some symptoms that come up over time, and then you might question it, but it's not obvious. So
this might be knowing your family history.
The diabetes type 2 especially is related more to our diet, our exposures to different chemicals in our environment, primarily though the diet and lifestyle.
Another question. Is there any other part of the milk thistle that we can utilize?
Yes, that leaf that has a lot of thorns, as you well know, is a good food. You just cut off the thorny parts, and you can use it as a green in your cooking. I don't know that it has any particular medicinal benefits, but in terms of having food value, it does. Let's take a look at the cautions because we're telling everybody to take it. It's always good to look at the cautions because especially when folks are on medicinal drugs or pharmaceutical drugs, So these are the drugs that you may be taking where you're going to have to be careful about milk thistle. One of the reasons is it can change the way the liver is clearing these drugs out of the body. It can speed that up or slow it down. Your dose is calculated according to what pharma knows about how quickly it's moved out of the body. If that's changed, then the dosing of these medications can be wrong, and they will either not work at all, or you can be overdosing and have some of the side effects. There are some links up here that you could go to understand, for example, an adverse reaction to milk thistle from the Adverse Drug Reactions Advisory Committee. This is based on actual clinical experience of folks who are using milk thistle who are on these drugs. Okay, so the milk thistle preparation and dose. Take a look at that. Now we do have a decoction, but that is not going to give you the full effects of the silymarin. There are other things in milk thistle, as in all herbs. The body only absorbs, even when you eat it, about 25 to 47% of the silymarin. Okay, I just want to scroll through the top again. Okay, so let's just kind of run through some of these. Okay. We stopped at diabetes. Fatigue, tiredness. Some of this has to do with terminology in Chinese medicine. You can learn about Chinese medicine in the database. Hepatic just means that it helps the liver. For edema, you were mentioning edema earlier when you were talking about people who have consistently consumed too much alcohol over time. There's that buildup. That can also be from heart damage. Hepatitis C, indigestion, jaundice, of course that's related to the liver, kidney stones. So you see lipid metabolism, a lot of this is focused around the liver. Now Lyme disease, from what we've said so far, can you guess how it might help Lyme?
Well, sure. I mean, aren't these tick diseases a bacterial, viral core, right? Bacterial. So I would think that our liver would be infested with that bacteria.
The tricky thing with Lyme is that it tends to congregate in certain areas of the body, and it could be anywhere, which is why it's so difficult to diagnose, because you can have radically different symptoms according to where it has made its home. In the liver, though, all of these different processes depend on the liver. So the support the body needs to combat Lyme is going to depend always somewhat on the liver. So this is an indirect way of helping your body with Lyme disease. And consider you may be taking antibiotics. That's a strain on the liver as well. So if you're taking antibiotics, the use of the milk thistle, once again, is going to be helping just to keep everything even keel with all of these different functions the liver is performing. Okay.
And so then you feel that milk thistle would be compatible while doing an antibiotic, or after the antibiotic's over?
I would say, and I would double check this, but I believe, in fact, yeah, you can take it with the antibiotic. So that is milk thistle in a nutshell. Do you have any other questions about it?
No, I do not. I think I've asked them as we've gone along. I think I'm good.
Okay. Then let me just stop sharing and say a couple of words about our next show. We're going to zero in on licorice.
Black licorice or red licorice? Okay, that sounds very good.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us I hope that you'll watch this, especially on our Facebook group, Herbal Knowledge Keepers, and jump in, share with us your experiences using milk thistle. We have a lot of practitioners in that group, and I know you have used it, so I want to hear from you. Share what your experiences are. And newcomers to it, you can ask questions. We have a growing group. We're up to over 400 now. I'm so
Yeah.
excited.
Yes. And that would be a place too, if you have any questions about how to use the herbal database, come into that group. You can ask questions there as well.
All right. So we're going to bid adieu. Love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Right. Thank you.